We're at Grant Park in Chicago, and we're coming to you live by satellite from the 1980 Chicago Jazz Festival. I'm Billy Taylor, and this is Jazz Alive. You know, Chicago was the first place I ever came to when I went on the road as a musician. Came out here with Eddie South, a marvelous violinist. I was reminded of his work last night when Jay McShann was on, and the sound of the violin in jazz is a very special one. Eddie South was a transplanted gypsy. He studied in Budapest and had many of the gypsy attitudes, both in terms of lifestyle and in terms of the way he played. But he was a jazz musician through and through, and he mixed many traditions, but he always got to the bottom of the blues, and he always did some of those very special things that make Chicago jazz different from other kinds of jazz from Kansas City or from New Orleans or from other places. Eddie South was a person who was very interested in the concert, the kind of performance, and he would have loved a concert like this, where a crowd of people, 50,000 people, all crowded together to hear really good music and responding, and the kind of interaction that an artist has with this kind of an audience. It's a shame that Eddie and Art Tatum and some of the musicians who were successful here earlier didn't live to enjoy this kind of performance as Roy Eldridge has and as Earl Father Hines has. But we're glad that there are giants who are still among us and who are going to share with us the kinds of talent that made Chicago the great incubator, great place of incubation that was so special in jazz. Eddie South was a person who not only grew up in Chicago and worked with the great Chicago bands, but he returned to Chicago periodically. He worked with those legendary bands like Teddy Weatherford and those kinds of bands when they played for both. Well, they played on the north side, the south side. They played for the fashion kinds of things with the Elite and the 500 well, I shouldn't talk about him. Let's just listen to some of the things that he played. That's a record that I haven't heard in a long time. I'm very proud of that. I made that arrangement. That's Sigan and rhythm, and that was from the Eddie South book. He had a lot of gypsy pieces that he liked to play, and that reminds me of a story. We were working up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and Eddie had given me all of this music. A lot of it was very difficult. Pianist is running all up and down the keyboard, playing these things that sound like the Zimbalin, the gypsy instrument, and so finally, I thought I'd turn the tables on him, and it's harder for a musician to play something that he has another arrangement of. So a second arrangement of something that you're accustomed to playing is sometimes more difficult than the first. So I made an arrangement of Rhapsody in Blue, which was a jazz arrangement, swinging all the way through. Parts of it are on the same recording, and I sprung it on him one day in rehearsal. And he was such a fantastic musician. He read the arrangement as though he had written it and blew my whole argument. And it was an experience that I'll never forget, because it kind of reminded me of some of the other things that we did when I worked with him. I met Earl Hines, and I met many of the legendary Chicago musicians who were his peers, Stuff Smith and many others. Earl Hines was a guy who had influenced my work very early. But I came belatedly into understanding just how great he was. And that was when I met him while playing with Eddie South. He had something which was not only unique in terms of being a piano stylist, but his contribution to the whole development of the jazz vocabulary was just as unique as that of Art Tatum or Fats Waller or James P. Johnson or Teddy Weatherford or any of the legendary jazz innovators. In a moment, to introduce this man is Dick Buckley, and here he comes to the center stage now. Dick Buckley.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dick Buckley, in case there's any doubt in anyone's mind as to who is up here and what they're doing. And it's my great pleasure to introduce to you. You don't hear me? How's that? Now I hear me. I heard that too. So I'll start all over again. I'm Dick Buckley. I was backstage enjoying the music and was kind of pressed into service here, and one of the great pleasures of my life to introduce the gentleman and the group that we have for you this evening. One of the first things I'd like to do is to introduce the fellas in the band. Many of them you know. There are a few of them whose faces may be familiar, but you should know all of them. And so we'll start with the bassist, Jim Cox. And the young man from Chicago who is currently working with Earl Hines, Eric Schneider. And a man who still lives in Chicago and who used to play saxophone and trumpet. He did the impossible. He doubled on the two instruments that years ago they said you couldn't, and he was great on both of them. George Dixon. And Bill Atkins. And baritone saxophonist Ron Colbert. And the man who was the musical director and arranger years ago and is the musical director for this group, the great Bud Johnson. And we'll jump back to the trumpet section now, probably the greatest lead trumpet player in the country, whether you know it or not. He's right here in Chicago, George Bean. And Arthur Hoyle. Warren Keim. And Sonny Turner. In the trombones, John Avant. And John Watson. And the bass trombonist, Ralph Craig. And the drummer is Jerry Coleman. Those are the fellas who are going to recreate the sounds of the Grand Terrace Orchestra. I don't imagine everyone here remembers those broadcasts out of the Grand Terrace, but I sure did grow up with them. Living in a small town in the Midwest, it was one of the highlights of the evening when I used to be up later than I should listening to the broadcast. The man who they've been talking about seminal players tonight, the man who every man who tried to play jazz at the piano owes a debt to Earl Hines, who moved the piano out of the rhythm section, made it a solo instrument, put it out with the front line like the rest of the instruments, and has remained right on top all through the years. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Earl Hines.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's wonderful to have this night. Thank you. I highly appreciate it, ladies and gentlemen, because when I left the town of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, this is the first town I struck with Chicago in 1924. And now, at the end of this year, the 28th of December, I'll be 75. And the first club I played in here was a club called the E-Light Number 2 on 35th Street. And you remember that? That's good. And then there was a band, there was Carol Dickinson, and there was King Oliver, Sammy Stewart, and there was many big bands at that particular time, and I joined here, and I finally I decided to go to the West Coast with Carol Dickinson, came back and went in the Sunset. After the Sunset, they opened up a place called the Grand Terrace. And while we were at the Grand Terrace, the gangsters walked in and took 25%. I thought I'd tell you that because some of them thought they owned it. They didn't own it, they just took 25%. They took it, they didn't ask for it, they just took it. And they told us that the show and the band, they said, all we want you to do is be like the three monkeys. You hear nothing, you see nothing, and you say nothing. And that's what we did. You've met the members of my organization, and I'd like to say that we're going to be playing some numbers that I used to use years ago. And here's the first tune we'll be playing. It's called GT Stomp. Some of you may have recordings of it. It meant Grand Terrace Stomp, and it goes something like this. So take it away, George. Bud, you got it. He was my leader when I was off stage, which I was doing so often at the Grand Terrace because of some ladies I had to see. But nevertheless, and we're playing a number that we recorded at that particular time, and he made himself such a wonderful reputation in playing this particular tune. We didn't know, we ran out of titles, and we said, well, let's call this the number that's in the book, called number 19. And we're presenting George Dixon. Here's number 19. George. Well done. The same solo. Beautiful. Thank you, George. We hope you remember this tune. Yesterday. Awesome. Yeah, damn it. Yesterday. Beautiful. Yesterday. That was Yesterday, the title of that tune, and Bud was playing because of many tunes that happened then. And here's the new youngster of my organization. And I've always been the type of person that was looking for new subjects. And this young man hails right here from Illinois. His name is Jimmy Cox. Jimmy Cox, how about introducing yourself to this audience? right, Jimmy. I'm glad you heard the last of it anyway. Jimmy Cox. I'm on a mighty place to go, but I can't believe that you're in love with me. I tried to place you far above me. Just can't believe you really love me. And after all is said and done, to think that I'm the lucky one, I can't believe that you're in love with me. Whip it, and after all is said and done, to think that I'm the lucky one, 'cause I can't believe, I just can't believe that you're in love with me. workers there. And now here's a little number that's called Father Steps In, and this is a rhythmic tune that goes something like this. Bud, you ready? Father Jumps. Thank you so much. And now, we would like to pay tribute to a guy that's been a very close friend of mine and showed me an awful lot at piano. He is now 98 years old, and he composed this particular tune, and it's called Memories of You. We're speaking of U.B. Blake. Yeah. Memories of you. And here's a young man I almost forgot, but I didn't want to forget him because he's right here from Chicago. A young man who's been with me now for about 3 or 4 years that just finished playing the alto sax, but he's got a little number he'd like to play now, dedicated to the guy that really I started out with here in Chicago, and that was Pops Armstrong, and his wife wrote this tune. And it's called Strutting with Some Barbecue, and here's Eric Snyder. exciting. Yeah, man. Take it out of the bar, Eric. Rolls down. How about the boys take a round of applause? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Gee, but you're a lovely audience. And I hope I have the opportunity of seeing you again in the future. Stay sweet.
Earl Father Hines and the Grand Terrace Orchestra recreated. Bud Johnson as the concertmaster there. Art Hoyle, Eric Snyder, who was just playing lots of alto out there, really into something very special. Franz Jackson, George Dixon, Warren Kime, and George Bean, Sonny Turner, John Watson, Ralph Craig, John Avant, Jim Cox, Jerry Coleman. Good band, good band. And everybody was really kind of up for Earl because he has something going, demonstrating some of the things that the Grand Terrace Orchestra was so famous for, the kind of call and response where he would play something, the orchestra would answer him and vice versa. And he even paid tribute to one of his influences, the legendary U.B. Blake. He played his beautiful Memories of You. And it's really kind of an evening where everybody's up and really excited about the very beautiful kinds of things that Earl Hines and all of the others, Lorez Alexandria and everyone else who appeared tonight. I'm Billy Taylor. This Jazz Alive special, this Live Jazz Alive special from the 1980 Chicago Jazz Festival was produced by Tim Owens. Our associate producer and director is Fred Bork. Technical director Paul Blakemore. Broadcast engineer Bob Knock. Assisted by Rich Rary. Our assistant directors are Wiley Rollins and John Smokey Bear. Mix consultant Michael Cascuna. Our production assistants are Leroy Fields of WNIU DeKalb, Ken Gagney of WBEZ FM Chicago, Joe Siegel, and Kate Kunz. Technical assistants are Steve Taylor, Ken Razik, Jay Bridgewater, and Michael Engelhaupt. Our master control operator is Ken Murray, and our publicity coordinator is Ruth Lee. We'd like to express our sincere appreciation to the City of Chicago and Mayor Jane M. Byrne, who are sponsoring the 1980 Chicago Jazz Festival. Thanks also to the Jazz Institute of Chicago, which is coordinating the festival. And, well, they're coordinating the festival sound for the Chicago Jazz Festival. And the sound is being coordinated by Jim Brown. I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and please tune in again tomorrow night when Jazz Alive's exclusive coverage of the second annual Chicago Jazz Festival continues with the Art Ensemble of Chicago, Muddy Waters, Stan Getz, and Lionel Hampton and his orchestra, swinging to a close the 1980 Chicago Jazz Festival. That's tomorrow night on most of these NPR stations. One of the things that we always ask you to do is to drop us a line with your comments on what you think about Jazz Alive. We'd like to know where you're coming from, where you're listening to us from, and tell us a little about the reaction that you've had to a festival such as the Chicago Festival. I mean, this is a very special occasion and one of many that Jazz Alive tries to bring to as much of the public as we possibly can. Drop those letters to Jazz Alive, National Public Radio, Washington, D.C., 20036. Production funds for this program were provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the National Endowment for the Arts. From Chicago, this is NPR, National Public Radio.